Hi, my name is Gloria Robert. Today we are discussing the topic ecological succession. Objectives of our lesson. By the end of the lesson, the learners should be able to 1. Define succession. 2. Mention at least 4 characteristics of succession. 3. State the 2 types of succession. 4. State at least 4 differences between primary and secondary succession. And 5. Give the final outcome of succession. So what is succession, or should I say what is ecological succession? We're talking about the same thing here. Alright, so succession can be defined as the gradual and orderly changes or replacement of communities of organisms, that is plants and animals, in an area of land over a period of time, leading to a climax community. Let me put it in another way. I can say it is a step-by-step and of course gradual replacement of plants and animals in an area of land over a period of time, leading to a climax community. Now, succession is a natural process that occurs in all of Earth's ecosystems. So here we have an image, and so let's use it to explain succession better. Now, number 1 here shows a bare land, a land without any plants and animals on it. Okay, now if this land is left for like 2 years thereabout, you find out that short grasses will have started growing on this land, and of course at that time you start seeing insects and some other lower animals. Now if this is further left for like, let's say 10 years, 15 years, that means at point 4, most of these grasses would have been replaced by shrubs and herbs that are more advanced or complex plants. And of course we have different diversity of animals to occupy in such. And if this is left for like another 30-50 years, you find out that these shrubs and herbs would have been replaced by even more complex plants such as trees. Of course they will be short at this time, and if left for like 100-1,000 years, okay, it would have turned to a very thick forest, okay, with all kinds of animals and all kinds of plants. So that forest is the climax community. Okay, so let's look at this climax community. What is a climax community? A climax community is a stable community which has attained equilibrium or an unchanged state. You can say it is an established community that can change no more. Okay, it cannot be replaced anymore because we have the highest diversity of plants and we have the highest and the most advanced of all animals there. So what else can we get? Nothing. Okay, such community has reached its highest development, so that same set of plants and animals exist there in every year. And so a forest is a good example of a climax community. Apart from forest, we can also have grassland, marsh. They are all examples of an established community. Now, to become climax, the community would have gone through a sequence of species. That means, for example, the first year, maybe you have just a species, a single species. But if that land is left for like 3-4 years, we have more species, and if it's left for 100 years, we have even more species. So that is what that is talking about. Now the species that constitute the climax community, they differ from one biome to another. So you can have a forest, a set of species in a forest might be a little bit different from that found on grassland and so on. So let's talk about characteristics of succession. Succession is orderly and of course progressively, starting with microscopic green plants and then ending with big trees. It always starts with simple organisms and end with complex ones. Okay, now complex ones. Then number 2 here says pioneer organisms are usually plants or producers. So the first set of organisms to be found there are called the pioneers. Okay, and so they are usually plants. Now the pioneer plants are the first to inhabit the changing environment. They can also be called colonizers. Number 3, diversity of organism species increase from year to year until climax is reached. That means at the beginning of the process of succession, you can have just few species, but it increases until it gets to even having uncountable, okay, different species of plants and animals. Then number 4, the various species present compete for the available resource. We talk about replacement. Simple ones being replaced by the complex one. Why? The simple ones are kind of weaker, and so they are being displaced or eliminated by the stronger one, which is called survival of the fittest, so that the stronger one or the more complex one can then occupy the place, or more of them can occupy such an area. The number 5 is changes in the species composition is rapid initially, but gradually slows down, okay, towards the end until it gets to the climax point. So let's look at types of succession. There are 2 types of succession, and they are 1, primary succession, 2, secondary succession. So let's start by looking at the meaning of primary succession. So primary succession is a type of succession that is formed on a bare ground or area of land where plants and animals do not exist previously. So if you have a bare land, okay, and there is no plants found there, no form of animals found there, that place is a good place for primary succession to take place. Now it takes longer time because new soil needed to be formed on such land. So no soil initially, so that must first of all take place before any other thing. Now the first set of organisms, which are usually plants as explained earlier, are called pioneer organisms. They can also be called what? Yes, you still remember, colonizers. Okay, now a bare ground now, which is good for primary succession, may be a building site where a heap of soil has been deposited, stones or even cement block have been left over, maybe after construction work or so. It can become a very good ground for the pioneer to start life. Now it can also occur on a bare rock, shallow lake or pond, or even part of an estuarine habitat with deposit of mud. You get to understand that better. So let's move on. Yes, here's an illustration of primary succession in a pond. This pond, a small water body, can become a forest by the process of succession. So let's look at this. Now, rain can carry soil from surrounding land into the pond, filling it and making it shallow. Remember, a pond is a type of aquatic habitat. It is freshwater habitat, right? And of course, it is stagnant, so it doesn't allow water to flow out. So soil can be just around it, and so the rain can carry the soil into the pond, and gradually the sand or soil will be filling up the pond. Now that is point 1, or the subset image 1. Now the second one here you want to look at is that some plants such as the pond weeds, these are the pioneer, okay, such as algae, they will begin to grow at the bottom. Okay, these plants are the pioneer organisms. They too can die, and when they die, their organic materials can accumulate at the bottom, adding more organic material to the soil or sediment. Okay, and that is already taking place at the second part of this image. Now the water along the edges now becomes so shallow that water lily and other floating plants can replace the pioneer plants, because we now have more soil to support them. And of course, at this time we start seeing animals such as insects, reptiles such as toad, and so on. Now these are further replaced by ridges and even sedges and other marsh plants that will evolve as the pond becomes more filled with soil. And that you can see at the 4th one. All right, and at the 5th one, we are already having trees found on such pond area. No, it was formerly freshwater. It has now become a terrestrial habitat. Okay, and these trees can grow to be very tall. Eventually the whole pond becomes a forest with tall trees and other wild animals. So it is said to have attained climax community. Do you get? I believe you do. All right, let's move on. I want to look at primary succession on a bare rock. Okay, let's look at this image here. Now at A we have a bare rock, no plants, no animals, in short, no soil found on this rock, but wind deposit new soil on this rock over a long period of time. So gradually wind will be bringing soil bit by bit, and then it will accumulate to the point that it can support the first set of plants, which are called the pioneer plants. And then pioneer or colonizer organisms, usually the lichens, are formed on this soil. Now by competition now, these are displaced, okay, by more firmly rooted plants such as mosses. Okay, now at C and D, grasses and sedges now grow over the time. Okay, that means they too will replace the mosses and then attracting insect, birds and reptiles to that place. Now at E, shrubs will replace the grasses and more diverse animals will occur there. And lastly, which can take like 100 or 1,000,000 years now, finally F, trees grow, more of these animals occupy the area, and decomposer activity set in leading to the formation of a forest, which is an example of a climax community. So let's move on and look at the second type, secondary succession. Now, secondary succession is the type of succession that exists on an area where vegetation previously existed, okay, but they are wiped off due to ecological disturbance. So we have a land with trees, animals of all kinds there, and something happened somehow, and all these trees and animals are wiped off, and so the land is bare. So at that point, secondary succession can take place. However, the area may not be totally stripped of soil and vegetation, so that pioneer organisms are formed from the previous climax community. Okay, now soil cannot be burnt. Okay, it occurs more rapidly than primary succession because soil has already been formed. Now let's look at areas where secondary succession can take place. Secondary succession can occur on abandoned farmland. If a farmer should abandon his farmland maybe for like 50, 100, 200, 300 years, by the time he enters the farmland, he might not recognize it and it might have become a forest. So it can occur on a clear farmland, overgrazed grassland, and existing community which has been interfered with by man and other factors such as fire, drought, and floods. These are the ecological disturbance we are talking about. So let's use this illustration to have a better understanding of secondary succession. Okay, an illustration of secondary succession on an area that experienced fire outbreak. Here, the first part of this image is showing an established community where we have all kinds of plants and animals, the most developed of all of them, and so they are there. Okay, the first show an established or previous community. Now B, the second shows the vegetation wiped away by fire outbreak. The fire outbreak is the ecological disturbance. Okay, to just clear all the plants and the animals will run away. And so at C, the previously existing area is bare of life, no plants, no animal existing there. Okay, but existing soil is still present. Remember I told you that fire cannot burn off soil, so soil still remains there. Okay, then D, some undergrass stem will remain inside the soil, some seed can still survive, some spores and so on of previous plants. Okay, and so they begin to germinate and grow into new grasses and herbs. So insects and other small animals will now find their ways to such place, okay, thus supporting more lives. Okay, the herbs and grasses are displaced, okay, over time by more complex ones such as shrubs, so that snakes, birds, monkeys, and other diverse animals can then exist there. Okay, finally, the last stage, it can take years or millions of years. Okay, finally, trees grow and more of these animals and decomposer activities set in, leading to formation of a climax community, which is a forest here. Okay, let's look at the difference between primary and secondary succession. Now, primary succession, one, it starts on a bare ground or surface, no plant, no animal found there. But secondary, it starts on already colonized surface that was probably wiped off due to ecological disturbance. Number two, it is slower or it takes longer time to reach a climax community, while secondary succession, it is faster or takes a shorter time to reach a climax community. Number three, primary succession starts with lower organism, while secondary succession, it starts with fairly complex organism. Primary succession, number four, new soil is formed, very important. By secondary succession, soil is present already. Okay, number five, pioneers or colonizers are newly formed. Under secondary succession, pioneers or colonizers exist from previous community. Then sixth one here is no form of ecological disturbance involved. All right, but under secondary succession, ecological disturbance is involved. Okay, outcome of succession. So what is the result of succession? Okay, the first and foremost of all is the formation of a climax or a stable community. Every other outcome is actually geared towards getting a climax or stable community. So the final outcome of succession is climax or stable community. The two is that changes in the physical environment. The environment will change. Why? Due to the structural changes of the species and their activities in the community. And lastly, simple organisms which start the succession are replaced by more complex one in an evolutionary trend. Meaning it starts with simple organisms which are being replaced by the presence of competition by more advanced one until a climax community is reached. Ooh, we've got into our students' activities, but let me remind you, you should be able to mention at least 4 differences between primary and secondary succession. So here we have 10 questions, which are questions that are meant to actually test your understanding of this topic and how much you can assimilate. Now, it's time for you to get your paper and your pen and start working on this. But if you are not able to answer any of them, don't worry. Go back to the video, watch it again, download it if you have to, listen to it depending on what you have with you. Okay, all right, and I believe at the end you'll be able to attempt them all. Yeah, and there's the answers to the students' activity. It's time for you to mark yourself. Our goal here is 100%. You should be able to get all, answer all this and get everything. But before we go, I want to remind you, subscribe if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel. Click the notification button, like my video, drop your comments, and anything you know you can do to promote it, please do. It's all for our good. All right, at this moment I want to say thank you for joining me in this class. Well, it's time for us to go, so we are starting by saying let's go. Let's